good. All right, so while we're waiting, I'm going to try doing this whole thing live. I'm going to just play a little gameplay intake. Maybe we get a couple on board here. If not, it's going to be me, myself, and I. So I've come to the conclusion the streaming is taking some resources, but yeah, it's not going to work during the stream, that's for sure. So we're just going to cut that out. Okay, we got a view though. All right, so what we are going to be focused on today is the Sinden Lightgun. It's been almost a year, I feel like, when I got these, and then I ended up moving, and the whole bit has just thrown off my mojo here. So, long story short, I've basically doing a quick review of the Sinden light guns. I have aim track guns as well, so I can do a pretty good comparison of the two. I will say, just like what you've probably heard on a number of other videos, we've got quite a bit of delay when it comes to getting any of these guns. It took about a year for the gun to arrive, and it also took about 6 months for the holster to make it, my way to the house. It just took a long time, but the quality is good. It is 3D printed. I mean, it has to be, but the weight as a whole, I was kind of laughing when I first picked it up. It is heavy. I mean, you could probably pistol whip someone and do some serious damage in comparison of the aim track. The aim track is more of a hollow type feel, and these are definitely more solid as a whole. I do think there's opportunity to basically mod these, whether the buttons themselves, just like the aim tracks, as well as adding what I call a shower hose to the cord itself, just so you've got a nice metal piece here. It does add a lot. So really just a brief comparison between the two. I mean, let's be honest, they're light guns, and with that, they both work. The distinct advantages between these two are the Sinden light gun is, in my opinion, it's got a better accuracy across the board, unless you've got your aim track bar that is like embedded into your cabinet itself. I could see that significantly improving some of your accuracy, in terms of recalibrating everything. you know, you're just not going to have to do as much for these Sinden light guns. As a whole, like if my kids were to play with either of these guns, essentially the Sinden light guns will pick those up straight away, and no calibration would have to be needed. Now, if the people that are using the aim track guns are the same height always and the same distance, you're never going to have to recalibrate those guns. So they, don't get me wrong, they are good guns as a whole. Now, the Sinden light guns also have additional buttons that the aim track does not. It's also got some really clever pump action, if you will, you know, to reload. So it's got a nice feel across the board. Yeah, I do want to say that if you were to pick these up and try to set them up in no time flat, you basically will get frustrated as a whole. Basically the wiki page is a lifesaver as a whole. They do a great job going through every single gun setup, and really just news as a whole. You're going to want to use this site, Sinden Lightgun. Well, the wiki page here. They also have a Discord page as well, and there's a lot of activity there. So definitely sign up for both of those, and you should be squared away. Now, if you were to think that you're going to plug and play these things, not a chance. You know, I've been doing this sort of emulation thing for, I don't know, 10, 15 years now, and you know, I thought I'd be able to, you know, squared away all of this all at once, because I've already set up the aim track guns, and the setup is nearly the same, but the only difference is you've got the white border, and that white border doesn't always work with all of the games. So what I've done is basically embedded the bezels with a white border, which I'm going to be doing a release here of all of these. I know on the Discord channel for the Sinden light guns, they also have bezels themselves, but I was finding that they weren't working, and it's not necessarily that, you know, the size of the white border was different. It's just, it simply wasn't a set for basically someone that uses the front end. So there's bezels that were around MAME, and basically they integrated, you know, some white borders across, basically an overlay of some of those bezels that come with MAME. So what I basically did was painstakingly go through every one of these systems, and we've got the bezel. I just pulled one up randomly as a whole. So you can see there, the bezel is just overlying the black bezel themselves. Now, keep in mind the width of that bezel might need to change depending on your lighting. I did find that, you know, if you're in a sunlit room, like if your cabinet's right by a window, you're going to have some issues across the board with some of that. Also, if you have LED blinky, if you've got lights on your cabinet, I found that if you turn those off, you're going to have your best, you know, playability there. So there's quite a bit of difference between the two guns. If I were to pick between the two, I mean, I still have two aim tracks. The Sindens are my go-to as a whole, just because it's more, I guess, pick up and play once you've set it up. But yeah, it's going to take you some time. You're literally going to have to go system by system and test the bezels out yourself. And once you get one of the games working, they're all going to be working. But unfortunately, I ended up testing literally every one of these games that I could find. And I scoured the net, and I don't know, there's 348 games that I could find that are in the official databases that we've got to play with. I've seen a couple sources having almost doubled that amount of games, which I'm still kind of hard to understand where those games are coming from, but maybe they just aren't emulated as a whole. Some of the games I've never even heard of, but you know, there's a lot of games here. So, you know, as a whole, what I'm going to do is just kind of, I guess, release some of these bezels, these bezel packs as a whole. and I'll show you where you can put them. I'm also going to show you some of the folder structure that Sinden Lightguns require, how to set up basically 2 players as a whole, and what else. And maybe I'll just hit some highlights of maybe some gotchas along the way, but keep in mind that the Sinden Lightguns themselves, this wiki page will get you across the board pretty good. So let's do this real quick. If we go, so first things first, when you install these, you're going to want to put your Sinden Lightguns in a folder that is relevant to you. It can be installed anywhere, and what you're going to want to do is auto start these basically exes, which are these light gun icons that I've got down in the taskbar. You're going to want to launch those at the start of your boot. So just add those to your auto start in Windows, and I probably don't need to show how to do that. You can do a quick Google search of how to add a item to your auto start on a boot. You just end up searching for the the run feature and shell it. So here are the 2 instances of the Sinden Lightgun. So I've got 2 players and I've got 2 separate folders here. Now, one thing that I did notice is basically the CPU. I don't have a vastly impressive system here, but I've got enough to basically do some decent emulation as a whole. So I think I've got a 1080 Ti here, or 1060 Ti, and you're looking at like basically 10% of my CPU as a whole running both of these apps at the same time. So that's pretty much always there, and just kind of keep that in mind. If you've got a potato of a computer, you probably need to check that out before you actually end up using these on an ongoing basis. So the Sinden Lightgun folder, this is player 1. Basically, I downloaded all the fixings. So what I'll do is upload the folders here as well, just for the sake of simplicity. But again, nothing is plug and play. There will be some configurations as a whole. So, here's the borders that I was talking about. That was on the wiki, and this is just basically an example. You can see that they were using an overlay and a white border. Depending on what white border you want, you would end up being able to select that in MAME. The only downfall of that is if you're using a front end of any kind, you've got a very good chance of that conflicting with some of the borders that you might be integrating or using bezels as a whole. So you might not be able to benefit from those, at least initially. But the Sinden community is pretty great. Whenever I was running into problems, there was always someone that had already witnessed that problem, and they were eager to assist here. So all in all, I'm not dissatisfied at all with these guns as a whole. And the aim track guns, I don't think I was really all that disappointed in those as well, but it was a bit frustrating using those, and one of my kids trying to play, it just wasn't working as intended, in my opinion, without some extra attention to it. Because he's a different height as I am, and usually shooting at a different angle, and I would be able to replicate the issues he was having just by getting in that same sort of level of sight, if that makes sense. But after a quick calibration, things would work. But I just want these to be more pick up and play, basically. So anyway, so what we've got here is extras. Now, something that you will need is this Reshader, and what this does is and there will be a time where when you push the button to add the border on your gun, where the game just doesn't pick it up. And what this Reshader does is it overlays a border of any kind, as well as the color of the border or the width over the top of the game or the application that you're after. And this was a lifesaver for a number of games, because without that white border, it's just your cursor is not going to work as intended. So like right now I'm pointing to you know, the screen with my red player 1 gun here, and you can see that it basically falls asleep if it's not moving, you know, for a certain period of time. If you click on any of the buttons, it will basically wake itself up. And you can see right now I don't have a border on here, but like you can see the shaky or the jaggies coming out here. So, and I'm holding this gun like pretty still, and I'm probably, I don't know, 3 feet away from it. But when I switch the borders on, you can still see that, hey, the jaggies are still there, but it's not nearly as much. And you know, there are some options in the application to basically check to try to remove that jagginess from occurring. But what you'll find is, you know, there's always going to be a bit of jagginess, also depending on how far or close you are to the screen. So right now I'm so close to it, I'm kind of stretching back here, and yeah, it's still a little bit jaggy here. But as a whole, right, like it doesn't impact your gameplay whatsoever here. I'm a little disappointed that I was trying to play a game while I was streaming, and that is likely due to the my resources, because just before I was starting to stream here, like I don't know, I was at level 10 on that intake game, which is really fantastic on the PC. I don't know, I love it. Strongly recommend it. So let's go ahead and start doing this a little bit on the setup side. So the Sinden Lightgun folder is where all the action happens. You've got a host of things. All this comes by default when you download it. All you really need to do is create a Lightgun exe shortcut, you know, which is just simply just right-clicking that Lightgun and creating the shortcut. And you can assign a icon to it, which they've got, well, in the extras folder, I believe there's, yeah, Sinden icons. I basically just downloaded everything I could find. And then you can assign basically the icon to that exe as a whole. So I just right-clicked, hit the properties, change icon, and you can select the file of your choice. And that's really the initial setup, right? You want 2 folders and 1 for player 2. Everything's going to look identical, right? The only thing is you want to assign player 1 and player 2 icon, and then you're up and ready. And once you've set this up to auto start, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the border so I can see the taskbar here. You're going to want to naturally click on the icons in the taskbar, but since it's already been auto start, you're going to want to go over here in the up arrow here for the pane, and you're going to double click one of these. And something I did notice is, you could see I just double clicked on one of these and that icon went away. I don't think it really impacts anything, but what I'm going to do here is just go through the tabs that I've got set up. I pretty much use the stock features with the exception of a couple things that I'll try to point out. But basically, first things first, you're just going to click that you agree, and you're going to hit start, and that's going to pick up your light guns as a whole. What you're going to find is, as you have basically downloaded the apps, you've possibly updated the firmware, which at this time I'm at version 1.5, and I'm using there's player 2 and player 1. You can basically select the one that you want, and you can select that light gun if your light gun's not reading, but that's it really. So you can select whichever light gun you're after, and then you can see you can update that firmware. So this tab is basically just to update the firmware as a whole. This is really where the magic happens. Most of this is all stock. The one thing that I think I want to point out is basically the autosave calibration on light gun, you want that checked, and then basically everything hidden in the system tray. Now there is an option to basically remove the jaggies or the mouse shaking as a whole. I think that's on the next tab or two, but you can see basically we've got the processing here, and this is basically saying that this is working, right? You should see what I'm seeing, and then you should see basically the overlay. This is good, or at least I think this is good. You guys will quickly tell me if things are not as they should, but you can see as I'm moving it, right? Like it's kind of freaking out right now because, one, I don't have the border on, and you can see that that's why it's not good, right? To not have that border on, which you eventually get used to it, I guess, as a whole. But it's just something to consider here. You need that border on for the everything to be nice and spotty. So let's go ahead and move on here. Now the wiki page does a fantastic job describing all of this, right? But as a whole, you might play with some of these camera controls, like the values here, but this seemed to work best for me as a whole. This gangster mode or gangsta mode is kind of nice, right? Like you can shoot sideways, or the gun is on its side, so that's kind of cool. And let's move on to the border. So the border as a whole, there's an option to do 4:3 or not. If you're using the bezel pack, there's no reason to use those other settings, but that's up to you. Hopefully this helps as a whole. But basically the border hotkey, basically this is what is being pressed to activate it. It can literally be anything you want. Just keep in mind that you don't want to be using something that is on your control panel. I don't use the Alt button for anything, nor B for anything. But this is a hotkey between the two, so we're good there. And then we're going to go ahead and do alignment. So now this one's interesting. So when you are, this is basically how you calibrate your gun. And what you'll find is when you're looking, like you want to look right on the brim of the gun itself, where I guess the little grooves are, right? You're going to stick your eye right on top of that. And if the cursor is not aligned with where that is on the screen, you're going to end up using these arrows to basically push that arrow to where it needs to be exactly lined up to your your specification. The big arrows just jump you forward greater, and the little arrows end up just nudging that cursor just a tad bit at a time. So once you've got it centered, you're going to do that save alignment changes, and then pretty much never have to do that again. Cursor offset, I don't think I touched anything on this, so I'm just going to go ahead and move on. But I think if you do end up having trouble with the shaking and such, you're going to want to play with possibly these values here. But by default, this is what it came, and I don't have a 50-inch TV. I think I've got like a 42 maybe. So anyway, we're going to keep moving. So button assignment. So now this one's going to be interesting because depending on what you have on your panel, you're going to want to possibly change this. But as a whole, the left mouse and right mouse is going to be important to maintain. Across a lot of games, that's how these are all set up, and that's how the aim track guns are even set up. So that's why I was like, hey, this is going to be easy. We'll kind of get more into that in a bit of some of the gotchas here. So we've got the front and left. I'm using space and return again. Nothing on my panel is using that, so that's just something to consider on your setup as well. And then there's a little D-pad on the Sinden guns, and I'd probably say some games on the Wii, you might utilize this, but in general, these really don't get used all that much. I'm thinking about getting one of the you know, the foot pedals. That might be useful for maybe like 5 games, but it gives it a more realistic feel, if that makes sense. So those seem to be working well with the community at large. And if you have one, let me know if it works well for you, because I hated that purchase yet. So moving on to the recoils, again, you want to just check this box. Basically, if things explode in your hands, I think that's basically just saying, hey, he's not liable for that. But I don't know, this whole like read before, you know, the terms and agreements are all kind of like, you know, why is this here again? But it's there, just check it and move on, you know, save and update. It's just weird. Like, yeah, we get it. It's like if you buy a space heater and, you know, it says this thing might be hot. Well, I mean, yes, obviously that thing is hot and don't touch it. So I don't know. I mean, some of that's common sense, you know, that you've got, you know, a recoil, you know, a pump action in this gun, and it's connected to electricity. You know, I guess you've got a chance of it exploding in your hands, just like anything else. That would hold true with the Amtrak as well. It's just they should just take that off. But I get it; it's a liability thing, I'm sure. But whatever. So nothing really changed here, and I'm going to go ahead and move on. So there's really not a whole lot to do on the setup. I know it was crazy intimidating when I was initially setting this up, and I was doing a lot of reading on the Sinden wiki page, and basically I don't want to say I was one of the first to get this gun, but I was a couple thousand in, and everyone was just trying to figure it out still. So I'm sure there's vast improvements even from the last time I've really looked into it, which is probably like 3 or 4 months ago. And I didn't even have my cabinet in front of me to, you know, really test out some of these things that were new to the scene. But I can now, and I can say that, you know, I've had no problems with, well, there's one game that haunted me on the PC, and it was what was it called? The elevator game. Everyone's saying, hey, it's not worth it, but it's one of those things where, like, I accepted a challenge to basically go through all of these games and test them, you know, for nothing, right? Other than just, you know, me saying I did it, and I've got a wheel that has all of these games on a single wheel, and they all work, with the exception of that elevator game. I think it's like Death Elevator or something. I could try to pull it up here, but long story short, my I don't know, my graphic card or drivers or something just simply doesn't work, and it seems to be a common issue, and it's just a combination of maybe the board or the CPU or thing that is causing this issue. So you launch the game and you hear the intro and you get past the logo screens, and right before the start menu, it basically just blacks out, and then it doesn't respond, and you've got to force quit it. I mean, I worked with a couple of those guys on the Sinden wiki page or the Discord channel, and a number of them were also having that issue, and some of them that had it, you know, that game working, you know, we tried literally their same settings, and it just didn't work. And it's unfortunate, but hey, out of one game out of 350 games basically, it's a pretty sweet gig there. But you know, as a whole, that would have happened regardless of the Amtrak gun or the Sinden gun. That's more of a configuration. So here's that anti-jitter thing. You simply just click that if your jitter is like erratic. You'll definitely see it. So once you've done that with one of your light guns, you'll want to do that with the other. And I'm just going to pull up the other one just so you can see it, and I'm going to breeze through there. So now we're looking at the blue, and there you go. Now everything is basically the same, and you can see it says it's gone to sleep. It's because I haven't touched that blue one for a few minutes here. But again, all you got to do is push any of the buttons to wake it up. And here's the buttons for player 2 that I ended up using, period and 2. As a whole, that's basically my start button here, is this front right, and the rear right is the border. The D-pad is just the standard there. I'm trying to think through this. The front left is just a random button. And let's see here. Right, yep. That is pretty much it. So as a whole, yeah, the start is 2 for me, and then coin is 6. So just as a heads up, you'll want to use that front right or start and coin together as an offset, to reload, etc. So that is it on the 2 setups. And now what I think I'm going to do is just talk through some of the issues that I ran across that might have been discovered now in the wiki page as a whole. But if it was me doing it all over again, right, I would continue to read through each one of these pages. I know it's a ton of information, but it does help. And basically your way of setting this up is launching at least one game in one of the systems, and then trying the border. If the border doesn't work, then you use the Reshader. And if one of the games works in the system, you don't need the Reshader to do 5 games on the system, and then the border works on another 5. That's not how it works. It's okay. Yeah, I'm still good. So it looked like my OBS had just gotten disconnected, but it looks like it's back connected again. So, but anyway, so the Taito Type X and the PC games, you're going to be using that shader option. All these others, you're going to be using the bezels as a whole. I will say the Wii U had like 1 game on there that just wasn't emulated very well, but the Wii itself had a unique configuration for all the games as a whole, which was interesting as a whole. Dolphin is just weird like that, but it's a fantastic emulator. So I guess while we're here, let's do the Dolphin. So I did a separate setup because I didn't want to screw up the Dolphin emulator that I've got as a whole. And what you're going to find here is I've got auto hotkeys that I converted to exes to basically launch from a front end. So again, the Sinden wiki page is fantastic. It's got a wealth of information. However, it's not necessarily built for the front end user as a whole, which I'm trying to pick up some of these pieces, but there's so much information here that it's hard to express everything. And I realize this is going to be an atrociously long video here, but for the Wii, for let's say Xbox, for PlayStation 3, some of the older games here, yeah, even PlayStation 2 or Taito PS3, all of these games are essentially going to need to be ran from an auto hotkey to basically get the intended experience, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is just open up one of these as an example, and I'll kind of show you how to compile it. But what I'll probably do is just launch, or I'll upload some of these auto hotkeys to kind of help guide how you would do this for some of these games that would require the auto hotkey. So you're going to find this across the board, and again, I'm just in the Dolphin gun game folder that I created or whatnot, but you're going to put the path of where this thing's at, and then where your backup is, and then you're not necessarily going to need this command here to basically say number lock, numpad, multi num lock, but for the Dolphin emulator as a whole, what I've got here is, what is this app called? It basically converts your panel, like your buttons, where it's typing in your keyboard keys. It converts it to raw input. So for Dolphin, right, you're basically either got one of those wands. What is that called? The Wii bar or whatnot. You've either got one of those, or you've got basically a D-pad that you're using for your games or your panel itself. And these games basically require raw input for well, really the Sinden Lightgun. I mean, you're essentially using raw input. But what this is doing is this is allowing a app to run. I guess while I'm here, it's just so much information. It's kind of incredible here, and I do apologize for such a long video here. The app itself is, let's see here. There's the Borderless game, which that's the app that will help with the borders. Let's see here. Trying to skim through here. X input converter. So this guy. So I think I might have talked about this in another video, but as a whole, right, what I've got is this launching behind the scenes with the games for Xbox or PS3 or the Wii, and this basically will lock out your buttons. This is why this is important here in the auto hotkey, is because when you're in there, the game launches, and then that app launches to basically allow you to play the game just fine because it converts everything to raw input. What this statement does is when you exit, basically it will push my exit key for that app. So when I programmed that app, you have an ability to exit or turn off the locking mechanism that makes your buttons raw input. So to get out of that feature, for me at least, it was number lock. So the one thing that, not number lock, the asterisk. So this is in the keypad, and this is basically saying you've got to push the num lock key and then the number pad multiplier, that's the star there. And then I had to put the num lock again for whatever reason for that to register. So when I exit a game, I can then use the control panel again to control hyperspin or whatever it is I need to do with the panel. So this part might not be needed for you, but if you are using this for a front end, I would recommend that you get the X input converter bit setup. There's really not a whole lot to do other than just install the application and assign basically your exit key. So once you've got this, what you've got to do is just turn this to an exe, and all you've got to do is right click and then compile script, and it will basically create your exe. So what I did is I just created a folder with all the auto hotkeys for that system, and that would allow you to change the path because your paths may be different. So it is kind of a laborious exercise, and setting some of the newer systems up, but it does work, but it does take a lot of time. So once you've compiled all of those auto hotkeys, you just end up dropping them in your root folder, and away they go. So this was one of the more time-consuming systems to set up. You can see that the Reshader application that we were talking about at the beginning of the video itself, you can see that you will need that. The Reshader, basically that application that I mentioned at the beginning, and you can see the tutorial on the wiki page. But that Reshader is going to be important for a number of these systems. And whenever you basically run that app and you select the app that is open. In this case, it was Dolphin. You'll find that the Reshader basically inputs a couple ini files and a folder on there. You don't end up changing anything on here. It's just more of a, that's what's happening. You run that app and then you get a couple extra files in here, and the next time you run the game itself, it's using that ini file to actually remember what you ended up setting up. So let's see here. So that was the Dolphin bit. Maybe I'll just kind of hit the gotchas for each one of these systems. Not really go too much into it because the system is generally basic in terms of the setup. You just end up going to the configurations of the controller, and you make sure that the buttons match whatever you ended up with the Sinden Lightgun Setup, in terms of what keys you're pressing. So the one gotcha with MAME, boy, man, MAME. So when I got these last June, I was super excited. It took a year to get here, and I'm just waiting to set these up. So I breezed through everything that we just talked through, and I get to MAME. I think I was on version 169 at the time. For me, right, MAME, there's no reason to be updating, every month. New scene, and you've got new games that are compatible, and then we're finding that, hey, there's greater light gun support, and now it's like, all right, so this thing's getting updated every month. All right, so it's time to join the bandwagon, I guess. But as a whole, the gotcha here is the light guns, the support for Sinden. And I don't know if this is actually on the wiki page or not, but I'm telling you, the guns themselves, they need to be on at least MAME 200, and I think we're at MAME like 230 something, I'm sure at this point. But that was my gotcha. So whatever I was doing during that live stream, which is embarrassing, right? Taking an hour to set up MAME, it's just totally ridiculous. The gotcha was 200 or later for these things to even work. So that lesson learned, and I'm pretty sure the wiki has that set up now, front and center. I'm sure of it. Yeah, the vest. Well, it might not be here. I'm just gonna skim. Yeah, okay. So it is recommending just getting on the most recent version as a whole, but yeah, it doesn't really call out. Maybe it does. If any of these guys discredit, yeah, okay, version cannot be fixed. Okay, that's correct. Yeah, okay, so there you go. So yes, yeah, and get at least the latest version of MAME. I guess you could go all the way back to 202 to get some of this stuff situated, but just get the most up to date, and then you don't have to worry about it as a whole. But that's that was a gotcha. So let's see here. So if we're talking MAME, we're gonna go here to MAME itself, and let's do this. And what you're gonna want to do is the controller folder, you're going to want to basically drop in this gun mouse configuration. I'm going to just open this up. Again, it's on the wiki. I don't want to discredit anything that those guys are doing. They're really fantastic. The gun numbers are the numbers that you want to end up using. The PID is actually the number of the gun itself. And what you can do is find that either through your control panel, where your what do you want to call it? Like your devices are set up on. Here, let's see here, control panel. And what you're going to want to do is just go to all the devices, the view devices and printers. I'm doing all this by memory. I'm sure there's gaps I'm missing here, but you can see that there's a lot cooking here. But basically your ID, if you click on the properties, generally speaking, it's in, so there you go. Well, that's the port as a whole, but let's see, this, I think that is the that's not actually the guns themselves. That's another bit here. Let's see if we can get here. Sinden Lightgun. Let's try this. So hardware, and let's see what we got here. It's port 2. I don't want to do too much here to. It's going to be long enough anyway. So let's see. Let's see. No, nothing. I'm sure it's on the wiki page. If not, but maybe I've just got to go through one of these and do the details. Here you go. Here you go. The events. So it's in COM8 for me, and there's the PID 0F39 and MI00. So that's that ID that we were just looking at. There it is. And then the gun code is whatever you end up putting in MAME. So the one thing that's irritating with Windows, this isn't a MAME problem, but the gun itself, when you set up your MAME light gun, and this is aim track as well, your gun number will change every time you reboot your computer. So this is basically trying to control that so that doesn't happen. The gun number that you'll end up using is whatever your setup requires. When you end up setting this up, here we'll go into this real quick. So MAME is here, and when we go, I'll just do point blank maybe. Okay, so point blank, and what you're going to find is when you push tab to actually set this up, you're going to find that there's a number of options you can choose to, actually set these up. And to do it correctly, you're going to want, well, what I say is correct. It might not be correct, but it's correct for me. And it likely will be for you as well. So player 1, I push tab to get here, I'm pushing enter. And what you'll find is, let's see here. So down at the bottom, we've got the analog bit. So this basically just shows up by default, the gun 8, but we basically want that gun 8 to never change. Like if I were to reset the computer, that might change to gun 5 or something, right? But that controller file that we were just showing will prevent that from happening. There's also a handy app that I'll kind of mention that will auto assign that stuff upon launch of your computer. But the things that you want to do is this analog increase and decrease. That's basically just moving your gun left to right. And then your increase and decrease for light gun Y, that's just moving your gun up and down. You'll do the same thing with player 2, but for the sake of it, I'm going to go down and go to player 2 as well here. So once you get all this stuff situated, what you're going to want to do is make this ini file read only, so your front end doesn't screw things up, and that's regardless of it being Hyperspin or Launchbox or CoinOps. So this is a MAME thing. So again, there's gun 5, and then there's the buttons that I've chosen. Well, I just moved my gun and it picked those up when I hit enter. So I'm going to go ahead and jump out of that. That's basically the setup for MAME. It's kind of ridiculous how easy it is as a whole. If you want to use the bezel or the overlay within MAME itself and exclude the border, which, well, in this case, the bezel here for breakpoints, I'm using what is coming out of Rocket Launcher. And the bezel project I utilized for the bezels. So some of those had missing gaps, but there really weren't many as a whole. So I just ended up making default ones for the missing bezels as a whole. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I'm going to show you how to make a ini file read-only and the controls for that. So let's see here. So this is under CFG, and there's point blank. That's what we just did. So when you launch a game, right, the file is going to show up here. you don't necessarily need to make this one read-only, but what you'll want to do is you'll go to the any folder, and you'll want to make this main any file read-only, because when you make changes, or if you run the front end, especially if you're running cheats, it can screw things up and you have to redo everything. It's just a pain. It'll save you some grief. So I just right-click that, hit properties, and then checked read-only. All right, so what else here? Nintendo, basically out of the box, if you're using the bezels, that thing will work just fine. You'll just have the gun itself set up in the emulator. Same thing goes with really all of these. It is painstakingly, you'll go through each PC game, you'll go through each Tato Type X, and you'll see if the border works. If not, you'll have to use that Reshader application. So let's go ahead and talk about that just once more, a bit more detail, and also while we're here, I guess, I'll talk about this True Game Controller Order app. And what this does is at the time of launch, it basically reassigns your guns to the gun number. So this is essentially, redundant if you've got that controller file that was mentioned a little earlier in the video that does the reassignment. But if you want the guns to basically just reorder as a whole, not just main, which I would strongly recommend, you just set that up. And again, this has a video already for it. I'll probably put it in the description below, so you can check that out. Again, this one's a quick setup as well to get that thing up and running. So the Borderless Gaming is the guts of how you would end up adding these PC games with a border here. So when you launch this thing, it's going to just ask you what is the game, or what's the application that you're using, which this is everything that I've got open, and then I can basically choose the app, and then I move the app over using the arrow, and that basically would allow the Borderless Gaming to happen. And what you can see here is what this actually does. So I've gone through like almost 300 games or whatever. The only ones that require borderless gaming, for me at least, so that's like if you're trying to put a border or a shader over the game, it just simply does not register. Like the game needs a borderless frame. And the only things that I ran into problems were these games here. So I suspect you're going to also have that same situation, but you never know. I'm probably 99% confident that this is all you would have to situate as a whole. Some of these I couldn't tell you what game. That's probably a Tato game, and that as well. Really, all of these. Just looking at it, or Techno Parrot, or PS3. It looks like. So that is the Borderless Gaming. That you're probably not going to use this all that much outside of these games themselves, but you will use that Reshader quite a bit. So just kind of keep that in mind. And that is in the folder that I'll be uploading in the Sinden Lightgun, the extras. There's the Reshader. So all that is, you open that up, you select the game that you're wanting to choose, and then you run, well, you end up clicking the app, and then you end up selecting the border width and the color, white, of course. But again, the wiki does all that for you. I don't mean to be redundant whatsoever. So what else? So once you've gone through all of these games, what is super handy, at least with Hyperspin, I'm sure with Launchbox you could probably create a playlist, which basically allows you to have one single wheel for all these games, regardless of the system itself. So I've I've essentially done that. That did take some time, but in the, here, let's get down here so I can show you. So there's the Sinden Lightgun. So I've got a nested wheel in Hyperspin, so this does work just fine. If you've got Hyper XML Spin set up, it should launch just squared away. So this doesn't necessarily mean this is 100% portable, but I will post the XML as a whole. But you can see the real like special sauce here is, first you've got to set up everything like in all the systems, get those things up and running. And what you'll find is, if you are looking at the XML, you see, here, let's get a block here, that's good. So here to here, so that's one game here. And the extra tag here is this XE bit, and that's basically telling HyperXML Spin what system you're gonna be, running here. So there's the 3D NES. And once you've got this set up in Rocket Launcher, what you're going to want to find here is, here, let's get a 3D NES, that might be a good example. So in the Games tab, there's Alternate Emulator. Yeah, it's not a good example. Let's think about this. Let's do Wii, Nintendo Wii. Oh, well, it's because I had point in here. It was looking for the word point. So when I go here to the alternate emulator, what we were kind of talking about earlier is some of these are kind of a pain to set up when it comes to, these systems, the PC games, Techno, PS, like all of these require some auto hotkey, which I'll provide an example. You could easily swap that out for literally every one of these games. But what you'll do is, to set this up, is you just end up going to this plus sign and select alternate emulator, tab, and you end up selecting the game that is here. And this is all coming from that XML. You'll want to select the emulator as PC launcher whenever you're launching from an auto hotkey, and then the system that you're currently on. And that will basically make the launch sequence seamless. And whenever there's an auto hotkey, it just requires a little bit of extra work outside of even the auto hotkey that we're showcasing on the Nintendo Wii. We turn those to XEs, and what you'll find is that's what this is pointing to. It's pointing to that game as a whole, that XE. And let's see, what else is there? Let's do. So if you're using Rocket Launcher, what you're also gonna want to do is, let's see if I can get here. If we go to Rocket Launcher and we go to the lib folder. The lib folder under user functions, what you're gonna find is, again, auto hotkeys, and let's see, if we go here, the thing that we want to focus on is, and I'll probably post these as well. I know the emumovies FTP was going under some construction to basically improve the performance or space. So some of the folders were under construction. Some of those things need to be repopulated, but for the most part, everything's back up and running here. But remember when I was talking about, if you so happen to listen to this whole, I feel like an hour-long stream here, at the beginning I was talking about that X input application that allows your panel to basically go from D input to X input. You'll want to input that here, and you'll also want to put in that exit key there, that numpad multiplier. If you remember, that's what I ended up setting up in that application as a whole. So all of these look identical to one another. All of these systems, you just end up putting in the path to where that XE is. Now, when it comes to the games itself, so what's different here is, again, auto hotkeys galore. And I'm going to open up one of these, I guess. So this took quite a bit of work to try to figure out, but it does work. And this is a different file than what you just saw. The only difference is we're basically selecting the exe, that's found here. And I'll end up just posting all kinds of different auto hotkey files. Hopefully it helps, or the bezels. But I will say, any of these systems were kind of a nightmare to set up. And that would have been true with, let me think about this. So when I had the aim track gun, I wasn't as serious as setting up a single wheel for all the light gun games. So some of these weren't actually set up with the aim track, but I'd probably say the majority of the systems, in this spreadsheet here, were probably set already. But man, the auto hotkeys were gotchas across the board. But yeah, I'll do what I can. I'll post, the files, but just note that you will have to edit the paths that are in here as a whole. For the PC games, just as a quick run through, the PC games were really fantastic. There's some really quality games here. Mad Bullet's good. Let's see. One of my favorites is that Dead Live, or basically it was a bunch of college students that did a college project, and it's actually one of the best light gun games, I think, that I played. Time Crisis, those games are classics, right? But Death Life is really fun. Let's see. Prohibition is good as well, and let's see. Yeah, I don't know. There's really a handful of these light gun games that you'll absolutely love. Blue Estate's fantastic, but there's so much to go and play here. I will say there was an Android. I don't know. Did I put these games in here? It doesn't look like it. So let's see. I think I put it under PC games, but there are Android games, using BlueStack. Let's see. No. Let me think about this. BlueStack was kind of a problem to set up. It's really not portable. It has to be on your C drive as a whole. I was trying to replicate some of the auto hotkey stuff, and I found that I had to end up ultimately changing the path to that because it's not portable. It has to be on your C. Let's see here. I'll know it when I see it. But I could have, let's see. I could have put it on, let's see. Did I hide it? No. I feel like, man, where is this? The Android bit here. Let's see. Android. No, I don't have that. BlueStack. I don't have it. BlueStack is the emulator as a whole. I almost want to, man, there are only a few games on here, but imagine like you on a Android game, on your phone, and everything's touchscreen, and that actually works really good when it comes to some of these light gun games that aren't really meant for a light gun, but man, do they play well. I feel like they're in the PC games here. I'm just gonna skim through here. Yeah, like that one. So this is an Android game, and and how should I show this? I don't know. Maybe I'll just launch it. You'll kind of see it. BlueStack is basically just an emulator for Android, and you really don't have to set the controls all that much. It's just setting up the the left click and the right click, and it's really fun to play. You're things away, but anyway. So I've talked about a ton of things here. Hopefully it wasn't too scattered. I'm sure you'll leave your comments of how you felt about this, but I'm not getting anything out of this. I know a couple guys on the Discord channel wanted to get my take on all this, but I think in general, if you can wait out the delay of getting these Sinden light guns, if you basically purchase the it's going to be like a year to, I'm using my mouse right now, but yeah, I mean, looking back at it, hindsight, is this worth it? I think it is. If you have the aim track guns already, if they work well with you and you have no complaints with it, you're probably going to be just fine without the Sinden light guns. If you have calibration issues and your space has the environment for the Sinden light guns, a darker room, or you can entertain the white border, you basically will be, you won't be disappointed at all.